Welcome back to Illuminator, the top-down shooter game that is played in complete darkness, and where the only light sources you get are your bullets. If that sounds like fun, please stick around for more. Also, play the prototype if you haven't already, and tell me what you think about it in the comments. Your feedback is extremely valuable for making this game a success. Now, this devlog is the first that will follow the delve deeper into a certain topic style. And this week I'd like to talk about the importance of user feedback and how I applied it to Illuminator. If you're just interested in seeing the changes to the game, please skip to this time, and otherwise stick around and enjoy the talk. So, starting off, why do I think that user feedback is so valuable? Well, I like to see it as follows. The ultimate goal of your game is to provide entertainment, and as a developer you want your game to be enjoyable for as many people as possible. This is not to say that you can make the game enjoyable for everyone. You must strike a nice balance between getting more players on board and sticking to the core ideas to keep the existing players happy. It's a nice contradiction. If you keep adding suggestions to the game to get more players on board, there are bound to be existing players that won't be happy with the changes you've made. And that is why you must think critically about the comments and suggestions you get. Let's take this feedback as an example. If I were you, I'd concentrate more on the light aspect, because that is what makes the game truly unique. Rather than put grenades in, play with light mechanics. Now, that is great feedback first of all, and I'll definitely be looking into ways to play around with the lighting mechanics. However, when I first saw this comment, I was thinking about maybe revising the weapon system. Maybe get rid of the pistol and the grenade to simplify it a bit, just keep the rifle and the grenade launcher in. If I were to do that, I'd be contradicting one of the core gameplay mechanics that I had originally envisioned, that being having a large arsenal of weapons and abilities to use. It's this sort of feedback that you have to be careful with and think critically about. Should I simplify the weapon system and add more lighting mechanics? Should I keep the weapon system as is? I really like the idea of working more with lighting mechanics, but if I keep the weapons and abilities as they are currently, would that become too complicated? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comment section, as I am still debating on what to do with this. Now, moving on, my previous points could make it seem like there is a lot of guesswork involved, but that is certainly not the case. When you start on a game, you ideally do a bit of market research to see if your idea would stick out. You can do this by looking at what successful games are doing, or you could look at what you yourself might find enjoyable in a game, but that alone is not enough. And that is where user feedback comes into play. Once you've developed your idea for a bit, show it to other people. That is when you truly find out if your game is enjoyable and whether some aspects need changing. I urge you, if you're thinking about starting a project, please consider doing prototyping very early on, as at the very start you can still radically change gameplay aspects. You are very nimble and agile in this aspect. Now let's have a look at what I did with SCP The Cycle and what I learned from that. I first came up with the storyline and had an idea about what the general feeling and atmosphere would be like, but I had no concept for what the gameplay would feel like at all. Yes, there are certainly a lot of good story-based games out there, but even they have some sort of enjoyable gameplay to assist the story. SCP The Cycle was essentially a glorified walking simulator. The gameplay was boring and dull, and that's because I hadn't thought about developing any gameplay at all. I was only focused on the storyline, and I later tried to fix this by adding some puzzle mechanics with the Holy Device, but I ended up not being satisfied with that at all. This is why I now think that starting out with an idea for the gameplay is a very good idea, even if you're making a story-based game. After you've made the story, please consider what type of gameplay you'd like. And always consider getting feedback early on. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is very important to know what players like, what they dislike, and to make sure that your gameplay is the most enjoyable as it can be. Now that I've hopefully convinced you about the value of user feedback, how do you even get it? There are a few ways. all of which have upsides and downsides. A devlog series is one of them. You can make a series of videos showcasing the changes you've made to your game, and people in the comment section can react about what they think. It's certainly an easy way to get a lot of feedback very quickly, but it's definitely the least accurate one. This is because showing your game in video format only doesn't allow your commenters to experience the game for themselves. And furthermore, as a developer, I can say that I definitely like to show the working and good mechanics in the videos rather than all the issues and bugs. So the game looks a lot more polished and finished in the videos than it actually is. I think a better way to gather feedback is to actually release a playable prototype. This allows your commenters to actually experience the game for themselves, and this will likely result in bugs being found that you didn't even know of. And at the very top of the accuracy chart, you have live testing. I usually do this with a few friends. I give them a playable build and they live stream themselves playing it. This often results in me seeing behaviors that I hadn't even expected, and this allows me to ask them about what they're doing and what they think at the moment. It's a very effective way to gather accurate feedback, but the amount of testers is way lower compared to the other options. Furthermore, you have to be careful with letting your friends playtest for you, as they could be biased towards liking your game more than a complete stranger. So, as of the release of this video, the second prototype is now available to play. Just like last time, the link will be available in the description and in the comment section, so be sure to give it a go. The main focus for this prototype release was visibility. Many commenters and my friends too said that they often had issues with walking into walls, not seeing when enemies died, and generally not knowing where enemies were at all. Now, of course, this game is all about limited lighting, so it's difficult to say how much assistance I should give the player. In this new release, the walls have been given an outline, the player now has a small light around himself, the enemies now have a dying animation where they explode just like the players, only less dramatically, and the enemies now sport a flashlight, which both makes more sense than them shooting randomly and looks better. Thanks for that one, Rob. I'd greatly appreciate it if you guys were to leave feedback again. I'm mainly interested to hear if you think that the visibility issue is now solved, or whether I have given the player too much assistance, still too little, or if it's just perfect. I'd also like to hear your thoughts about the weapon system which I talked about earlier. Should I simplify it or should I leave it as is? Keep in mind that I definitely want to look into adding more lighting mechanics, so if I leave the weapons and abilities as they are currently, the game might become a bit too complicated. Also, if you have some cool ideas for new light mechanics or for the game in general, please let me know in the comment section. I am always open to hearing suggestions. Anyways, that has been it for this devlog. I hope you enjoyed the going into detail style, and I will see you all in the next one.